for the benefit of everyone that can't join us today. So a little about today. I'm Carla Ortega-Santori. We'll do some introductions in a minute or two. But what can you expect for today? I will be giving you an overview of the Leadership for Public Purpose classification. A current applicant will also walk you through their university's application process, and you will have a chance to start crafting your ideal classification team with a few people that are going through the process as facilitators and guides for you. Everyone on this call that has gone through an application process will tell you that your team is a crucial part of it. So if you've gone through the community engagement classification, you might have an idea, or if you're currently planning for the leadership classification, you will also know that having a team and a successful team is so crucial to this process. It's the part where most people get stuck. So today we just want to demystify this whole process of putting together your team and get you started on assembling that part of the process. So some quick intros. I am Carla Ortega-Santori. I am at the Doerr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University, and I have been there for around 3 years, and about 80 to 90% of my job is this elective classification in partnership with Carnegie and the ACE Foundation. So most of my time is spent managing and doing things like this, informing the public and managing the application process. My background is in IO psychology, so I also help the leadership development team on campus to develop strategies that are evidence-based to develop our students as leaders, which is something I really enjoy doing because it can put my IO psychology background to work in more detail. So I really enjoy that, and I really enjoy meeting students where they are in their leadership journey, which is also really fun to engage with students. And I am zooming in from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Someone said that they are waiting, I think Chris said they're waiting for the hurricane. I hear you. I've been through a few, but you'll do fine. I will pass it over to Donnette. Can you give us a quick intro?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Donnette Noble. I am a faculty member in the Leadership Studies Department at Fort Hays State University, and I also serve as the Director of Civic Learning and Engagement at the university. So I'm responsible for a lot of institutional-wide initiatives, and Leadership for Public Purpose is one of those initiatives that we're pursuing. So it's good to see some familiar faces on the call today and a lot of new folks. So thank you for joining us.
And hello, everyone. I'm Michael Chikeleze. I'm a faculty member of leadership at Valparaiso University. As Donnette as well, I'm involved in a number of university-wide curriculum and co-curriculum synergies around leadership, as well as the co-chair on our campus of the Leadership for Public Purpose application.
And hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Moss-Breen, and I am an associate professor in an interdisciplinary leadership program at Creighton University. And yes, again, working on this system-wide, the Carnegie application at Creighton University. Nice to see you all.
Thank you all. Michael and Jennifer will be helping us facilitate some smaller groups and give their insights whenever they can. And Donnette will be sharing more about her process at Fort Hays. So before we do that, some technical considerations. We will be recording this. It will be available on YouTube and on our site. So if you want to rewatch or share with someone, you can. You can send your questions using the chat function while we are offering the initial content. We'll be pretty laser focused to make sure you get all the information you need, but write down your questions if something pops up or if you don't want to lose your thought, and we'll get to it later. We will have plenty of time to discuss in smaller groups when we're talking about teams. So we'll be doing that too. And please mute your audio during the first part of this webinar. Then we will encourage participation. So you can definitely unmute when the time comes. And can everyone see the live transcript or the closed captions? Is that visible? I think so. Okay. Great. So the Carnegie classifications, the universal classifications, or I think they were known as the standard classifications shortly before this, were first published by the Carnegie Foundation in the 1970s, and have been the nation's leading framework for describing U.S. higher education institutions. The elective, and these are what you may know as R1s, R2s, designating universities as very high research activity or high research activities, or describing colleges as small liberal arts colleges. So this demographic information that that universities and colleges have and use regularly are the universal classifications by Carnegie. Now, the elective classifications were actually created to serve another purpose. They are voluntary self-assessments that recognize institutions that have embedded a specific theme or topic into its culture. In this case, we are evaluating how universities and colleges have embedded leadership for public purpose or leadership education and development. They're kind of congruent in this context, how they've embedded that into their culture. Earlier this year, the foundation partnered with ACE, the American Council on Education, to give both types of classifications just one organizational home. And the strategic vision and general direction of elective classifications is entirely handled by ACE. And at the Doerr Institute, where I work, we are the stewards of the classification, of the leadership classification. So we manage all the administrative duties, such as organizing and facilitating these webinars, managing the review process, collaborating with the National Advisory Committee, and so on. If you want more details on, or a more detailed overview of the classification, you can watch one of our previous webinars where I go more into depth on the sections, what the process is, and all those details that are also very important. The only other elective classification that exists is the community engagement classification. You may have heard of that. You may have applied previously. If you have, then this is a very similar structure and process. So what is the Doerr Institute? How do we fit into this? We are at Rice University, and we focus on elevating the leadership capacity of Rice students by offering them evidence-based strategies of leader development. And we are also striving to elevate the practice of leader development in higher education. At Rice, we serve approximately 40% of students, and we are not affiliated with a department or office, so it allows us to serve all students at Rice and meet them wherever they are in their journey. We often get asked the question of why create this classification now, and it takes us back to when we were kind of standing up the program or the institute at Rice. And as we were developing our student programming at Rice and looking at the current landscape to compare and contrast, we found a few issues. First, that leadership programs at universities or colleges tend to be really scattered and without a uniform strategy. They're not centralized. And when you take a look at colleges and universities, no two programs are doing the same thing. There's a lot of variability. And I mean, universities have so many different silos and things that they're doing, and there's no uniformed, centralized structure to oversee all of that. There's also an abundance of interest groups that are interested in improving leadership education and development, which is a great thing. We have the International Leadership Association. We have the Association of Leadership Educators. There's the CAS standards, the National Clearinghouse for Leadership Programs, and they're all doing such great things. And they're all making valuable advancements, but we're largely without a centralized strategy or somewhere that aggregates all of this great data. And also leadership is mentioned in so many mission statements for colleges and universities. At least a third of institutions mentioned in the US News and World Report of 2018 mentioned leader or leadership development or leadership in their statements. But then when we take a look at leadership programs, their budgets are often so very small, with very few staff and no measurement of efficacy or infrastructure. And there's no way that we're really holding quote unquote accountable these universities or colleges for what is mentioned in their mission statements. So when you take a step back, you can see it's a pretty complex problem that requires an equally complex solution. So the elective classification process presented itself as a solution to this problem, a way to recognize the excellence in leadership education and development, and also as a developmental process for all institutions that apply, because that's what it really comes down to. When you go through this process, you realize so many great things that are being done at the university or college. Silos are diminished. Things just start coming together when you do an aggregation of all the data and you step back and look at everything that is being done at your institution. So that is how we came to this classification, and we became the administrative home of the classification. So like I said, we managed the day-to-day of the classification, but the Carnegie Foundation still awards the designation, and ACE is the main hub really for all operations. So how did we go about designing and launching this new classification? Here is a really quick overview of that process. In January 2020, we had our first meeting. We gathered 30 scholars, practitioners from a lot of institutions, and we tried to focus on representation from all institution types because it was really important to gather all perspective. A small liberal arts college versus a community college versus bigger state schools, and having those perspectives on board when we were designing this application. We wanted to come together to discuss how would we define leadership and what would be the indicators really of a committed institution. We didn't really come to an agreement on a definition per se, because there are so many variations, but we did agree on a general approach to leadership for public purpose. Once we were done with that, we drafted and revised a comprehensive application. And once we had a definition that we agreed on generally and a draft, we sent it out to 100 scholars and practitioners to get their feedback. When we got their feedback, we reviewed, revisited the application, and initiated a pilot process. So we had institutions go through the self-study, and 9 institutions went through it. They created their campus teams, they collected data, and they completed their applications. And once they submitted, a core team of reviewers evaluated the applications and offered feedback to that pilot cohort. And really this process was so beneficial for, I think, both the participants and us, because it revealed some real opportunities to improve the process, improve the content, and also some common tendencies among the applications. If you're interested in learning more about those common tendencies, you can take a look at one of our previous webinars, also available on our website. So where are we now? Well, currently applications are open for the very first cycle. And the Doerr Institute is currently hosting webinars like this one and workshops to provide support and information, because this is the first, it's the first inaugural cycle really for the leadership classification. We are very adamant on providing support to everyone that needs it. So if you have questions, if you need more information, feel free to reach out to me, and also take a look at all of our webinars and offerings. So I've mentioned leadership for public purpose a bunch of times. You might be wondering, what exactly is this? Well, the definition was built in collaboration with the Carnegie Foundation to capture really a variety of activity that can be considered leadership education and development in higher education. So leadership for public purpose really transcends this narrow personal gains idea of things like a job promotion or being elected club president for a student, right? Or even organizational outcomes like meeting your quarterly goals. And instead it focuses on the pursuit of public goods, like the ones listed here on the slide. We refrain from using one model of leadership because we do not mean to be prescriptive of what your university should use or your college. Instead, we want you to learn, we really want to learn how you're approaching leadership on your campus and how it compares to this. How does it fit into leadership for public purpose? So regardless of what approach you take, if you use a social change model, if you use an authentic leadership lens, a holistic approach, the most important thing is that you end up contributing to the public good. And I think everyone could argue here that education and higher education contributes to that in so many ways. So there's a lot of ways where you can kind of plug this in or compare and contrast to what you're doing at your school. And also very important, leadership for public purpose can be manifest in all realms of social life, really. You don't need a school of public policy to see this on your campus. It can be present in private business, public and nonprofit institutions, neighborhood and community life, professional associations, civil and government institutions, religious institutions. Really, the sky is the limit. So as long as you can justify and provide evidence of that, you can include that in your application too, and explain how your approach compares to this. And one of the first questions that you will be asked is in the application is how your university approaches leadership and how it contributes to the public good. So a little overview of our classification timeline so that you have an idea and you have this in the back of your mind when you're planning for your application process. Applications are open and the next big deadline is July 1st, 2023. You must have purchased or started your application by this date. It's an intent to apply, and the idea is that we can plan for the review process knowing how many institutions are applying this year or in this cycle. So these are some important dates to remember. December 1st, 2023 is when applications are due. So while you can start your application on July, you don't have to submit it by then, and you can finish it until December. We are likely to be running on this 2-year time frame in order to be parallel with the community engagement classification. So once campuses are notified in summer 2024, we would reopen the classification cycle in 2025 and then be awarding them in 2 years. The classification is retained for 6 years. So once you receive the classification, you can retain that for 6 years until you have to reclassify. So these are important dates to keep in mind. Yes, if you have any questions about these technical details, feel free to put them in the chat and I will address them later. But before we go into building a team and getting to the nitty-gritty of it, I would love it if Donnette could give us really an overview of how you're approaching this application process, how you built your team, and the things that your team might have to tackle in the near future so that everyone on this call has an idea of what it takes to be on this classification team.
Thank you, Carla. Yes, I'm happy to share. And it does take a team and a big team and a lot of time and a lot of energy, but what an amazing opportunity to be a part of this self-study where we can really examine where leadership development and programming and assessment is occurring on our university campus. So we're very excited about this. And just a little background, Fort Hays State University, it started out as a normal school in like 1904, which was teacher ed, and it has evolved over the years to become a university. We've got 5 colleges now at our university, a lot of programming. We have international campuses, online modality. So, I mean, we've really grown over the years. And so even though we have a small contingent of students on our physical campus in Hays, Kansas, around 4,700, we have tens of thousands around the world in our various programs. But anyway, we are so excited to be a part of this because we are a state comprehensive university. We're part of the Kansas Board of Regents schools. There are 6 institutions. And, you know, we really are stewards of place, you know, and so we are intent on everything we do. You know, it must serve the communities in our region and wherever we find our campus community. But in my role, I have a split appointment. So I have my faculty position, and then I have this administrative role, which I mentioned earlier, Director of Civic Learning and Engagement. And under that umbrella, I have a lot going on, but one of the things I do is chair one of the goals of the university's strategic plans. We're on a 5-year strategic plan. We're in year 4 right now, and the goal that I co-chair is community and global engagement. So this really was a beautiful fit with that programming. And once I proposed to our president and provost and our executive leadership, our senior leadership teams, and the other goal co-chairs that I really thought this was worthy of our time and attention and that we should be pursuing this because of all of the different things we have going on that really fit well under this framework. And they were very, very excited, so much so that we have a special strategy now under Goal 5, which is the community and global engagement. So, you know, we've actually articulated this institutional commitment to this pursuit by making that part of our strategic plan. So what were the first steps in the process? My co-chair of Goal 5 in the strategic plan and I selected one of our and she is an adjunct instructor in the leadership studies department, but we selected a faculty member from leadership studies who is intimately familiar with the Doerr Institute and also with this leadership for public purpose framework. And so we invited him into our fold. So we have 3 project leads is what we are calling our team of 3. And then our team of 3, we went through the framework very intentionally, looking at each section of the framework. There are 15, if you've had a chance to study this. The last one is an optional, that's a reflection portion. But we went through each of the sections and, you know, thought about what campus units, what departments are, you know, very intentionally focused in these areas. And we identified people then to be section leads. And in some instances, we have 1 section lead, or we might have 2 people who are co-leads for a particular section. Just to give you a quick example, with institutional identity and culture, that's section 3 of the framework. And this has to do with, you know, how do we describe our mission and vision and reflect on our institutional commitment to different things and our values around leadership for public purpose, et cetera. And so the 2 people identified as co-leads for this particular section are our provost at the university and then me, because I've been working a lot with this framework. And our provost has been at our institution for more than 20 years. And so she has a lot of institutional knowledge and awareness, a lot of different experiences on the campus. And so she can really dig into the nuts and the bolts of the history and the mission and the vision of our university. So that's just one example, but then it is up to each of the leads or co-leads of a particular section to then develop the rest of their team. And we have, even before we got to the point of identifying leads, we went through and created a timeline. When does the application need to be initiated? When must it be submitted and finalized? And so what we did is we've built out the timeline with a lot of monthly and sometimes biweekly check-ins, so that the project leads can be meeting with the section leads and section co-leads to find out, where are they in the process? Are they collecting the data they need, the evidence they need? Are there any stumbling blocks? How can we support them in this process? So we've built a lot of meetings into our schedule, but very intentional about who we wanted to be a part of this process. And then we also, because the university is committed to this, the project leads and the section leads are all through the appointments through the provost's office. So we are taking this very seriously because we want each person who is involved in this process to understand how critical their role and really make that commitment, so there's some accountability behind this. But anyway, we are very excited. We're picking up a pretty good head of steam working on our project. And Carla has already mentioned this in her presentation, but what's so beautiful about this particular framework and application process is there really is the elasticity within this, so that regardless of the type of the institution, you can recognize where you are really kind of driving these initiatives on your campus and where you might find some spaces for collaboration. So it's really this great opportunity for a self-study to, kind of pat yourselves on the back and say, yay, we're doing this really, really well, or maybe not so much in this area. We really need to work harder in this space. But anyway, we will have, according to our timeline and our schedule that we have built, we will have our evidence and all of our data collected by the time the application needs to be initiated, the 1st of July of 2023, at which point then the project leads will take the information that the leads and co-leads for each of the sections, what they have written, the information that they've contributed, the responses that they have crafted, we will take all of that information and then we'll go through a rigorous editing process to make sure, syntax is appropriate. So we have, consistency in language and presentation. And then the project leads will spend the fall really fine-tuning that application. And just 3 of us will be having access to the Give Pulse space, because we need a lot of people working on this and gathering data and evidence and writing the narrative, but then we wanted to limit access to the actual application itself so that we don't somebody doesn't have an oops on a keystroke and delete everything. So we're trying to be really, really cautious with this, but that is the basics of where we started and how we started and where we are in this process right now.
Donnette, that was so incredibly helpful. And you mentioned Give Pulse. Give Pulse is the online platform where the application is hosted. And you've already touched on so many of the next points that I was about to make. Let's take a look at this really quick. What does an effective team look like? Donnette already mentioned so many of those, but feel free to hop in and expand on any of these. From I mean, from Donnette's firsthand experience, we know that the team will be the engine behind this classification train, right? So in many ways, picking the right team will help you navigate this process, like Donnette was able to do. From extensive research in organizational behavior in IOPsych, we know that successful teams are able to articulate their goals really clearly. So having your motives be clear, making sure that you define the why of why your institution is applying, communicating that to your team and the rest of the campus can be a huge help. You should also consider the wide range of perspectives that you can have. So a university-wide team will give you access to a wide range of information. Plus, you'll get to have conversations about things that you didn't even know were happening on campus. Like Donnette was saying, you can celebrate all these small things that are happening that maybe not everyone had an awareness of. Data collection is a significant part of this process. So your team members should be able to provide the data or at least know where it's located, where to find it. So going through the application, like Donnette said, I should have just said, like Donnette said, at the bottom of this slide. Going through the application and knowing or noting who might have the data can help you achieve this. So a really simple table of section, question, and stakeholder is very helpful. You should also have a clear idea of the influence and power some team members have on your team. Formal or informal authority is useful to move projects along. Make note of who you need on your team, or at least keep informed if they can't be on your team, or maybe have a representative on your team. And letting others on campus know about the classification is also a part of this process that we don't always talk about. Socializing it to everyone will garner more momentum and more enthusiasm. Donnette, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's really wonderful. And one of the things you touched on that we have done and done a lot of, and when I say we, it's my Goal 5 co-chair and I, because we're always talking about everything related to Carnegie classifications. But one thing that we have done is very intentionally met with different groups on campus. We have the student engagement cluster, and right now we have, the student success cluster, which includes student engagement, advising, admissions, et cetera. So when they meet as a team, we will ask for 10, 15 minutes of their time so that we can let them know, hey, this is what we're looking on, and we look forward to your support, your contributions, et cetera. So, anytime there's an opportunity, whether it's faculty senate, staff senate, senior executive leadership teams, we are there, saying, hey, please, can we have some of your time? And so far, everyone's been really receptive with that. And then we also have met with academic council so that we can speak directly to the deans of the college and the directors of various units to let them know where we are in the process. And that spurs a lot of additional interest and questions. And so from there, we are meeting individually with either deans or department chairs, just kind of on an ad hoc basis. So those conversations to keep people updated and keep this just top of the mind awareness is so important, because it really is an all hands on deck effort. So everybody's contribution to this process is very much appreciated.
Yes, it really is. And getting that FaceTime, like Donnette said, or Zoom time, whatever, whatever we're doing these days is so important too for this process. Great. So that's what an effective team looks like. It can look like different things on each campus, but this is what we've gathered from experience with the CE classification, from our friends at ACE, and from our pilot application process, and also just general research and knowledge around teams. So now is when we get into the fun stuff. We're going to break out into smaller groups to start creating our teams. To guide your discussion, we have created a worksheet. I will stop sharing for a minute so that we can all look at our faces. You don't have to show yourself on video, but I'm sure it'll be more fun when you're in smaller groups and get to interact. I will share the link to our, multiple screens at a time is so confusing, but we're getting there. So yes, we will be breaking out into smaller groups. Each group will have either me, Donnette, Michael, or Jennifer guiding the discussion if you need help or guidance. We have created a worksheet that is editable. So I will paste the link in the chat. And when you click on that link, you can create a copy of the worksheet. So click on the link and click on make a copy. We will focus on that first section for today. And before we go off into groups, take a minute to create that copy of the worksheet. It's requesting to, okay. Let me give you all access. That is important. And I also have a PDF that I can share if you have trouble. So while you all wait for me to do this, have any of you applied for the CE classification before? Yes, I see some head nods.
You know, Carla, while you're doing that, I will take an opportunity to answer a question in the chat. Matthew had asked about whether there is overlap in data information between the CE application and the LPP application. And what I have discovered, or what my project lead team and I did, we went through both of those classifications, and I've got everything on my trusty documents right here. And we have gone through that because we are planning at Fort Hays to pursue the CE classification, but we wanted to do the Leadership for Public Purpose classification first, because there are still some things that we need to initiate or implement on our campus as it relates to CE. But anyway, our section leads are actually, there are so many similarities that, you know, our leads are going to be appointed to both processes. So first they'll work through the Leadership for Public Purpose application, and then they'll transition to the CE application. And the sections are not necessarily the same number in the frameworks, but they're similar content. For example, institutional alignment. We found some really close similarities between the LPP section 9, which describes the institution's commitment to LPP directly, and the CE application, which is in terms of systemic actions and strategies to ensure, you know, like co-curricular units and community partners are working together. So we did find enough similarities that it made a lot of sense on our campus to have the same people leading both of those processes. And I'm happy to share what resources we've created with others. If you'd like to reach out directly, I can drop my email in the chat.
Thank you, Donnette. And before we conclude the webinar, Matt, I will also put a link in the chat for a comparison of the two classifications. We recently did this with our partners at ACE, and we went through the applications and compared, so that could also help. Great, so I saw that you were able to make copies now. I also dropped a PDF version in the chat. What I want you to do, or what I would like you to do, is to take a minute to look at that first section and try to answer. I'll give you a minute to answer maybe the first 1 or 2 questions. so that you can brainstorm individually. And then I will break you out into smaller groups so that you can discuss that first section. And once we come back, be prepared to share maybe 2 takeaways with a larger group. All right, so I'll give you a minute. And I'll stop talking now while I set up breakout rooms. Hi, Chris. Do you have questions about the activity or the classification?
Sorry, I was having a problem with the microphone. It's about the classifications themselves. I think this meeting is more advanced than where I am in the process. I thought it was going to be more about what is this process all about? Where are we going? What are we trying to collect? And I'm not ready to talk about my team yet. So
Gotcha. And this is really you don't have to be in the process yet. You can start to think about what your team could look like, but we will have some time for questions after the activity. And we can always meet one-on-one and I can talk you through the process if that helps.
okay.
Catherine, I hear you. Probably, I don't know, like 60% of the people that will apply are new to the process completely, and that's fine. You don't have to have your team defined by today. This is just to give you an idea of what teams could look like, even hear out other people and see who they're including in their teams or what offices or departments they're planning on including in this process. Could be helpful maybe to get a grasp for what this could encompass. So you don't have to have the answers today. And you don't have to know everything. And you can just listen in if that's better for you. All right, so I will break you out into smaller groups and we will come back in 5 minutes. Okay, people will be bumped in here, whether they want to or not, in about 15 seconds. And Shannon, I will say that we are planning another webinar that talks about managing the process, and maybe that's one of the topics that we could cover. I mean, Leah, you asked that, not Shannon.
Carla, there was a question in our group about whether or not that people can see the application and just get a sense of the questions as they begin to prepare their teams. Is that available, or do you have to like go in and apply before you can see that?
No, not at all. I actually included a link to the application in the worksheet. So in question, it's barely visible. But in question 4 of the second section, there's a link to the application, and there's also a link to the application in our website. I'll link it afterwards too. Thank you, Michael. Okay, great. So I don't want to run out of time and miss out on all the takeaways that we heard. So how about we hear maybe from 1 or 2 groups, 2 takeaways from your conversation that the rest of the group needs to know. They simply cannot leave today without knowing. I can start the process by volunteering my friend Shannon, who everyone nominated on our team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon. I'm from Florida International University down in Miami. And one of the key departments, office stakeholders that we identified was for those universities that have the community engaged classification already, was to involve those committee chairs or people from that process to help us through this process and thinking through who should be on the team, that they would be a really good first point of contact. So if your university or college has that, suggest reaching out to them. And then I think the others kind of all group into really anyone who's doing leadership, which I think is kind of a common thing here, but having only 2 takeaways, I guess I'll group it that way.
Thank you, Shannon. Who else from another team would like to share? Jennifer, Donnette, Michael, would you like to volunteer someone?
Matthew, since I knew you before we went into that breakout session, I guess I'm going to have to pick on you. So do you mind sharing a couple takeaways?
Sure. So we also spoke about being able to, collaborate between a community engagement process and this process, as well as acknowledging that not everything in the application has to be like how to phrase it. Not all of your ducks have to be 100% in a row. Some of them can be aspirational, that it can be as a result of this self-study, we are planning to do this. And this is our commitment as an institution to how we are going to continue to have leadership for public purpose, and that it doesn't have to be everything is bright and shiny and we are perfect, but some things can be aspirational coming out of that self-study.
Thank you, Matt. And yes, that is a very great point. Something that we cover in some of our previous webinars. When reviewers will be looking at your applications, there really will be different levels of what your answer could be. So you can either provide concrete things that are happening, programs that are already in execution, results that you've seen. You can also provide concrete plans. So we have formed a committee, we have these plans for a program or these learning outcomes that we will be measuring, and this is the way that we'll be measuring that. And there are some other levels of, oh yeah, we have an awareness of that, which is not such a great answer. We always prefer maybe concrete plans or present plans, but it's also a developmental process. So any of that is helpful when you provide it in your answers. Is there a department or office from someone else's list that surprised you? That surprised any of you? Or Jennifer, I see you've unmuted. Is there something that you want to say?
I was going to help with the previous question. I
Okay,
think someone
yeah.
in our group, but I'm not. Catherine, I think it was you. Maybe you had some really good questions. But I don't know if she's available to. No, maybe it was Karen.
I'm
Yeah, it was
here.
Karen.
I'm here. I'm so
Oh, there
sorry.
you are. There you are. It's
I'm on more
okay.
than one screen and I lost the,
It's
I
okay.
lost the cursor.
You
Yeah,
just
I
asked some
asked
good questions.
questions
Yeah.
about the collection, like how much of the data is already in place and how much, new data collections are so labor intensive. So it's a combination of both, and there are counts and there also are outcomes. I asked about where, are there any student outcomes? Like, yeah, there's student outcomes, learning outcomes, and you also include your professional development, and you also include curriculum, curricular level outcomes, and there's a 500-word lock. That was helpful to know. So.
So you all got into the nitty-gritty of the application. I love it.
Well, I'm just concerned about the data.
No. It's a valuable concern, and it's, I think, something that is on everyone's mind right now. What do these sections look like? What is the data that we'll be capturing? And this is something that we can maybe cover in like an in-depth workshop, where we lay out the data and we all sit down maybe and come up with teams and specific data contributions maybe. So y'all just give me great ideas. I thank you for that. Maybe that's an upcoming workshop that we do more in depth. Something that I haven't heard and that many people forget to include is your human resources office or department, because there are questions about staff and faculty policies. So things like what leader development do you offer your staff and faculty? Do you offer them workshops? Do you offer them budget for conferences, etc.? And also promotion policies, promotion and tenure. So that's also an office that many people forget. Communications office or university communications or public relations, whatever you call it at your university or college, is also useful. Is there anything that I've missed, maybe Jennifer, Donnette, or Michael, a department or office or stakeholder that's really essential to have on your team?
I mentioned communications. So a lot of information can be pulled that are things that exist already through either HLC, recent HLC applications, or just that upfront information about the institution in general was super helpful to get from those sources.
We also have, aside from student engagement represented, we also have our teaching innovation and learning technologies department, as well as institutional effectiveness and assessment. So they're a part of it as well.
I was wondering if I could add something. We applied for the community engagement in the last cycle, pre-COVID, and we were not successful, but I learned a lot in that process. I was tasked by the then provost to manage the job. And then as people heard about it, they would go to him and say, oh, I'd like to be involved. I ended up with like 35 people, and we spent a lot of time resetting, which I think really, it was detrimental to our application. So while it's a lot of work and you need help, there is, I think, such a thing as too much help.
That's a great point. I mean, a real working team or group probably can exceed what, 5 or 7 people to do the nitty-gritty, right, of the narrating and synthesizing. And you maybe need, I think, Jennifer, you have like a bigger group and then a smaller one that you that you do most of the work with.
Yeah, we have a group of about 6 who will ultimately manage and write the report. But because we have 9 schools and colleges, we have people individuals from each of those areas, as well as HR and the president's office, to their allies for us at times when we need things from the schools and colleges, and sort of knowledge translation in terms of, oh, this is, let me help. I've been in these meetings. I understand what they're looking for here. So they're not involved as much as the core team, but they know that they have a role, and they were appointed by the provost to do that work, similar to what happened for Donnette.
Thank you. And really, each team will be different, or committee or group will be different on each campus. But these are all just valuable takeaways. Other stakeholders that were mentioned in my group that I'll offer all of you is, and Shannon, I think, mentioned some of them, but other leadership center administrators, micro-credential teams, because they offer a lot of those on campus. Any faculty that is related to teaching about leadership or researching leadership. The Center for Excellence in Teaching was also mentioned. Institutional evaluation or institutional research is also valuable. And that's all I have. Donnette, were you going to say something?
In the library, because of our scholars repository, because we, you know, the application does ask about scholarly works and how information is disseminated. So we have folks from our library on our team as well.
That is helpful. Thank you, Donnette. Well, and does anyone else have anything to share? We'll do some questions after this, but I want to wrap up this conversation and make sure we don't miss anything about teams. Okay. So you've started your ideal team list. How will you convene this group now? What is the next step? Will you get buy-in from your provost and get them to appoint a team? Will you approach each team member individually, or each department or office? Whatever that looks like for you, that is possibly the next step. And I also had the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, the team there, share their insights. They wanted to share it with you all. And they said that they leveraged Institutional Research Office. That was a big helper for them. And also leveraged their NECHE accreditation. So they had this other accreditation process that was ongoing and leveraged that to gather data. I'm so happy that we got to discuss this all. Chris, I hope this wasn't too overwhelming. The idea wasn't to overwhelm anyone with all these future plans or concrete plans. It's just really to give you an idea of what it takes to build this team, who would be ideal stakeholders for you to approach. And I hope this was helpful. I will copy and paste a bunch of links in the chat now so that you have access to the online platform, the elective classifications website, the Doerr Institute website where we have other resources, and a resource library also on Higher Led, our community platform. And while I do that, does anyone have a question that they would like to unmute for or ask the larger group?
I have a real general question. And I need to look at the other webinars, and I need to read the application. So what is there an operational definition of public purpose that's used?
Great question. The Carnegie Foundation has explored this more in depth, and the elective classifications team has explored it. So I don't have it handy, but that is a great note that I will think to add in the next webinar. You can maybe browse the elective classifications website, the one that says carnegieclassifications.org, but please reach out to me, and I will talk more about that with the ACE team. That's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to browse my chat to see other questions that were popped in. Let's see.
Is there, can I ask a question? My question is there any webinar or possibility of having a webinar or a conversation for people who are before the level that we were in today? As in somebody who said, oh, Carnegie classification for leadership that sounds interesting. I'd like to find out more, because that's the stage that I'm in. And maybe there are other people in the same stage.
Yes, that is a great question, Chris. And we could maybe even form a support group for newly informed. I'm just kidding. We do have a webinar available, and I will link it. But I am also always available to meet individually with anyone that is interested in hearing more. Even after you watch the webinars and you're still kind of, I don't even know what this classification really is about. I need more clarity. I can meet with you one-on-one, or we can even put a group together and maybe talk about it.
I would love that, because I'm at the point in which new at the university, don't even know where to start, don't have don't have any political capital whatsoever. So I'm way before you guys are in the process here, and I would love to meet with other people in the same stage.
I am copying and pasting a link to our YouTube playlist where you can see some of the other webinars. And I might have to do a separate chat for just all the links that I'm posting for you guys, but there's the YouTube link. Leah asked, is there a fee structure, or the fee is the same for each institution? There is a flat fee. It's a $900 flat fee for every institution. If that is a great financial burden for your college or university, then please write to me separately and we can talk more about that. Let's see if I can see anything else. Am I missing anything in the chat?
Hi, I had one quick question, just to clarify something, because I think it was said earlier, like how it works on a 2-year cycle. My institution recently, we just got a new vice president of student formation, a new president, a new whole bunch of things, and a lot of institutional changes come. And we're trying to gauge, like, if we were to do this, is this round or next round, just because so many changes are happening, like, would it be more beneficial to do it in the next sequence? For when that next round would start, would that start in March 2024, if I'm understanding that correctly? Like, would it be released in March 2024 or 2025?
It would be released in 2025.
Okay.
The applications would open by then, and they would be due in about a year after that. If you are trying to decide between this cycle and next cycle, I understand it's a little overwhelming to think about planning this whole thing for next year to develop. But I will say that because it is an inaugural cycle, the review process will be parallel to that. It is the first cycle. It is the first time that we're releasing this definition. It is the first time that we're considering how this looks in every campus. So the review process will be parallel to that. Every cycle will have a review of the application and the framework. So it will get a little bit more, not restricting, but maybe a bit more, what's the word?
Refined?
Refined, and I don't want to say harder. It's not that it will be harder or easier, but there might be some, it might be more rigorous maybe in upcoming cycles. Maybe that's the word.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No, that's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Of course.
I asked a question in the chat. I'm at a small university. Are the expectations different depending on your R1, R2, small, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question, Edith. every application will be reviewed holistically. So reviewers will have an idea of your campus context, of your demographics, everything that you include in your applications. So it will be based, the review will be based solely on that application, and they are encouraged to look at it as a whole. So a budget for a smaller college is exponentially different from a large state school, maybe, or a large university. So the expectations will, yes, vary. That's a great question. Thank you.
And Carla, I'm just wondering too, similar to the question that Jacob posed in the chat, support network, is there any plan or has been discussion of follow-up cohorts or connections once institutions receive the classification for kind of ongoing accountability?
That's a great question. So on our online platform, Higher Led, we will be forming private or exclusive groups for the people that receive the classification to privately share, and it's essentially a learning community that we have built online and will be ongoing after the classification. And you can join for free right now. And the link is one of the many that I've posted. I'm sorry for the link spamming. Brittany asked, have any of you used the pursuit of the designation as an impetus for curricular revision or improvement? That's a great question. Jennifer, Donnette, or Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I did see in the pilot application process a lot of future plans for curricular revision, and even some plans to include a leadership course in the Gen Ed curriculum, which was really great.
I'll chime in and say that that was one of the main reasons our provost wanted us to do this, was because we have leadership splashed all over the campus, and we don't know, we can't really define it, and it is literally all over the place. And so she wanted us to remove some of those silos and be more strategic about it. So that was one of the reasons. And we are considering curricular, I guess in a consultative way across campus. Once this is all said and done and we get feedback, maybe to help create a unified learning outcome or something across each of the leadership classes or courses or programs. But that's aspirational at this point.
Thank you. I realize we've gone over time. I will stay behind though for any questions that are still in the air.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.